Welcome everyone to today's story. We are about to dive into a thrilling case that once shocked public opinion and kept the police struggling for a long time. This is not just a tragic traffic accident, but beneath it lies a sinister conspiracy skillfully concealed. Hawaii, one of America's tourist paradises, famous for its beautiful beaches and breathtaking natural scenery. But amid this pristine, poetic beauty, in 1992, an enigmatic accident occurred. A couple planning a weekend getaway turned their trip into a tragedy. The wife tragically lost her life at the scene. At first glance, it seemed like just an unfortunate incident caused by bad weather. However, as the police dug deeper, unsettling signs began to emerge. No one could have expected that behind this accident was a story filled with tension, intricate investigations, and evidence that appeared to have been wiped clean. What's more, one of the leading forensic experts at the time, Dr. Xuong Ngoc, played a pivotal role. With his sharp analytical skills and meticulous investigative methods, he gradually uncovered a horrifying truth that no one could have predicted. So, what truly happened on that fateful night? What chilling truth was being hidden? Join me as we turn back the clock to 1992 to uncover every clue and reveal the truth behind this case. On November 27, 1992, a Friday during Thanksgiving weekend, everyone was immersed in the joy of family reunions. However, the weather that day was terrible, with heavy rain and strong winds. Typically, such weather conditions would increase the likelihood of traffic accidents. Sure enough, at 8:30 p.m., the police received an urgent call. When the officer on duty picked up, a frantic male voice came through the line. He hurriedly explained, "My wife and I had a car accident. She's seriously injured and it looks like she won't survive. I need help as soon as possible." The accident occurred on Highway 131, near Kilauea volcano in Hawaii, about 16 miles from the location. Upon receiving the report, the police immediately dispatched Officer Richard Sherlock, who was patrolling nearby, to the scene and notified the ambulance for urgent assistance. As Officer Richard arrived near the scene of the accident, he saw a small van parked nearby. The vehicle had veered off the road and crashed into a small ditch ahead. The headlights of the van were still on, and through the light the rain could be seen pouring heavily. The driver's side door was wide open, but there was no one inside. Upon closer inspection, he found a middle-aged man in the rear compartment of the vehicle, soaking wet, holding an unconscious woman with her hair disheveled. The woman was covered with a thin blanket, and when Officer Richard gently lifted the blanket, he saw that she was covered in blood, with a large wound on her chin. Seeing the police, the man appeared visibly anxious, but tried to remain calm, saying, "Please save my wife, she's about to die." Officer Richard reassured him, "Don't worry, the ambulance is on its way." While waiting, Officer Richard took the opportunity to ask about what had happened. The man introduced himself as Kenneth Wayne Matheson, a police officer from the Big Island Police Department, and the woman was his wife, Yvonne Matheson. Hearing this, Officer Richard felt a sense of relief, realizing that they were fellow officers, which would make the investigation easier to coordinate. Kenneth Matheson continued, "My wife and I were driving up to a cabin in the mountains for a weekend getaway. But on the way, we got into an argument. In the end, she was so angry that she jumped out of the car. I was also upset, so I just drove off. But a few minutes later, I calmed down and realized it was dark and the rain was heavy. I couldn't just leave her there, so I turned the car around to look for her. Unfortunately, the rain was so intense that my visibility was limited. I think I may have accidentally hit something. I was terrified and realized I might have run over my wife, so I quickly got out of the car to check. Sure enough, I found her lying behind the vehicle. I rushed to pick her up and put her in the back seat, then immediately called the police. She was still alive when I held her, her breath weak, but but she kept whispering how much she loved me. And then she passed away. That's basically what happened. The ambulance arrived quickly at the scene, but unfortunately, the wife was pronounced dead. Was this car accident truly an unfortunate mishap, or was it something more sinister? The two possibilities were entirely different. The police continued to question Mr. Matheson about the cause of the argument with his wife. He explained, "I suspected she was seeing another man. I even thought that our child might not be mine. I planned to have a DNA test done. That really angered her. Before I could even stop the car, she opened the door and jumped out." Mr. Matheson's statement seemed logical, and everything appeared to follow a clear sequence of events. On the surface, this looked like a routine traffic accident. However, the police had only one side of the story, from Mr. Matheson and no other witnesses. Although he was a police officer, the investigators felt uneasy and suspected that something was amiss. They began to wonder if Mr. Matheson had staged the entire incident. After all, he was an experienced officer with over 20 years in the force, which meant he had the skills to set up a perfect scene. Therefore, the police began to treat the case with greater scrutiny, no longer seeing it as just a traffic accident. The first step in the investigation was to conduct an autopsy on the wife. In forensic circles, there is a saying, "The body will tell the truth." Therefore, the result of the autopsy was extremely important. However, due to the peaceful nature of the area and the rarity of homicide cases, the coroner, Charles Rayward, who was assigned to perform the autopsy on Yvonne, was not a highly experienced professional. In fact, for him, forensic work was more of a side job. After conducting the autopsy, Charles concluded that the victim had died from severe head and chest injuries, consistent with the signs of a traffic accident. Based on the autopsy report, the coroner's conclusion perfectly matched Mr. Matheson's account of the accidental death of his wife. Charles also considered this to be a routine car accident and issued a death certificate citing the cause of death as a traffic accident. At the same time, Mr. Matheson received bail from several people in the police force. Eventually, the court ruled that the case was a traffic accident and sentenced Mr. Matheson to third-degree manslaughter with a 4-year prison term, but with probation. After paying the bail, Mr. Matheson was released. The police also announced the cause of death of his wife, Yvonne. Perhaps due to confidentiality concerns, the police only informed the public that she had died in a traffic accident, without revealing that the person responsible for her death was her husband. It seemed that the case was closed easily. However, as the story progresses, nothing about this case was as simple as it seemed. Despite the conclusion, two investigators, Paul and Peter, felt that there were still many suspicious points, especially concerning the attitude of Yvonne's family. Yvonne's parents believed that their daughter's death was far from an accident. They didn't trust that it was just a traffic incident because their daughter's relationship with Matheson had not been as happy as it appeared. In fact, their relationship had been extremely troubled. They had divorced and remarried. Long before the tragedy, Yvonne had confided to her parents that she deeply regretted marrying Matheson. Additionally, recently, whenever Yvonne visited her parents, she often had bruises on her body. Although she claimed she had injured herself accidentally, her parents had long suspected that these injuries were linked to Matheson. Upon learning this information, investigators Paul and Peter became even more certain of their suspicions. They immediately visited Yvonne's neighbors. Everyone confirmed that the couple had frequent arguments and that the situation had worsened recently. As a result, many people in the neighborhood believed that Yvonne's death was connected to Matheson. Some even went out on the streets to protest, demanding that the police reopen the case. However, the police showed little interest in these claims and refused to reconsider their conclusions. It wasn't until a journalist investigating the accident happened to discover that the person who had run over Yvonne was her husband, Mr. Matheson, a police officer, that the shocking news was revealed to the public. The reporter widely published this explosive information. The people of Hawaii were deeply divided. Many believed that the police were covering up for someone in their own ranks. Simultaneously, unresolved cases from previous years began to be questioned, with the public wondering whether there had been similar cover-ups that had prevented justice from being served. Consequently, large-scale protests broke out, and under the intense pressure of public opinion, the police were forced to reopen the investigation. In January 1993, investigators Paul and Peter had not made any significant progress in their investigation. Shortly thereafter, Mr. Matheson went to claim his wife's body, and despite the opposition from Yvonne's family, he insisted on having her cremated. This action raised many suspicions. Prosecutor Spang was also determined to investigate Matheson thoroughly. However, since Yvonne's body had been cremated, the forensic team could only study photographs of her remains. Forensic experts had conflicting opinions regarding the injuries on Yvonne's body. Some believed that there were numerous head wounds that appeared to have been caused by repeated blows from a hard object, which did not seem to match the injuries from a car accident. Others argued that the skull injuries were so severe that they could have been caused by a strong impact from the vehicle and the subsequent fall to the ground. The two opposing viewpoints each had their own reasoning, which made it difficult for Prosecutor Spang to make a definitive decision. They concluded that only an expert in physical evidence and crime scene reconstruction could resolve the matter. At that time, Dr. Xuong Ngoc was a renowned forensic expert in the United States, and he was a leading specialist in physical evidence. However, Dr. Lai was located in Connecticut, thousands of miles away. To appease public outrage and ensure that the deceased could rest in peace, Prosecutor Spang decided to invite Dr. Lai to assist with the investigation. On March 11, 1993, Investigator Paul brought the case files to Dr. Lai's office and presented his request. Upon learning that the suspect was a local police officer, Dr. Lai recalled previous cases he had investigated where the perpetrators came from all walks of life, including law enforcement. Cases involving police officers were often very difficult to investigate. Dr. Lai himself had once been a police officer. Whether Mr. Matheson was innocent or whether he had killed his wife, this was something Dr. Lai did not want to see. Nevertheless, Dr. Lai decided to accept the invitation to join the investigation. On May 6, 1993, Dr. Lai arrived in Hawaii. After a brief meeting with the investigators in charge of the case, he immediately began his work. From the case documents, it was clear that there were several suspicious points. However, an investigation required evidence, and as a forensic expert specializing in physical evidence, Dr. Lai faced a significant challenge. The most crucial piece of evidence, the victim's body, had been cremated, which severely hindered the investigation. Dr. Lai then visited the crime scene for inspection. Upon arriving, he found that the situation was even more complicated than he had imagined. The crime scene was virtually devoid of any traces. After all, the incident had occurred 6 months ago, and at that time there had been heavy rain. Any traces that might have existed had likely been washed away by the rain. So, what could be investigated next? He immediately thought of the suspect's vehicle. After the case was closed, the police had informed Mr. Matheson that he could retrieve his car. However, when he arrived, he was told that he had to pay a $300 storage fee, which he found too high, so he refused to claim the vehicle. As a result, the car had been left at the police impound lot. When the investigators visited the impound lot, several officers reported that the car had been thoroughly inspected multiple times and that there was almost nothing left in it. No useful clues had been found. However, Dr. Lai expressed, "If we're lucky, I may find something special." So, could the car provide a breakthrough in the case? Dr. Lai began by inspecting the exterior of the car. If the victim had been hit by the car, there would certainly be marks on the body of the car, particularly on the front. and there could even be blood, fibers, or some other traces left behind. However, after a thorough inspection, no such traces were found. This suggested that Yvonne had not been struck by the vehicle. Dr. Lai stated, "We found no dents on the body of the car, no hair, skin, or fibers. The car was completely intact, and there was no evidence to suggest that Yvonne had been hit by this car." Underneath the vehicle, Dr. Lai used specialized equipment to carefully examine the frame and the bolts, joints, and other areas where small particles might be trapped. Sure enough, he discovered some small fragments of skin, hair, and other traces that would be difficult to detect with the naked eye. After testing, the results confirmed that these traces belonged to Yvonne, indicating that she had indeed been run over by the car. Next, Dr. Lai examined the interior of the car. Although the incident had occurred 6 months earlier, there were still many traces of blood inside. Some of the smaller bloodstains had faded and were hard to see with the naked eye. Dr. Lai quickly used specialized equipment to reveal these stains. According to Matheson's statement, after running over his wife, he immediately carried her into the back seat. Therefore, many of the bloodstains were found in the back seat. This account seemed plausible, but Dr. Lai noticed that there was also a significant amount of blood found on the driver's seat and the passenger seat. This contradicted Matheson's statement. The police immediately went to question him about this detail. Matheson explained that after running over his wife, she was still alive. "I placed her in the passenger seat and prepared to drive her to the hospital. I thought it would only take 20 minutes, but on the way she kept struggling, trying to avoid worsening her injuries. I then moved her to the back seat." Based on this new statement, Dr. Lai conducted a thorough examination of all the bloodstains inside the car. After completing this, he was almost certain about the truth of the case. With Dr. Lai's sharp analysis, the truth slowly began to emerge. Suspicion 1. On the car's dashboard, there were numerous blood spatters, at least 100 drops. These bloodstains were created by blood being expelled at an average velocity. The only way such bloodstains could have formed is if the victim had been struck or hit with great force. According to Matheson's statement, he simply carried his wife into the passenger seat, so the bloodstains should only be from contact or movement, and they should only appear on the seat, not on the dashboard. Suspicion 2. On the ceiling of the car above the driver's seat, there were several bloodstains splattered from left to right. These stains likely indicated that the victim's head had struck and swayed violently. If Matheson's account was true, that he simply placed his wife in the passenger seat, it would be impossible for the bloodstains to be created in this manner. Even if he had lifted Yvonne high enough to make her head hit the ceiling, it would only leave a contact stain, not one that spread from left to right. Suspicion 3. In a photo of the victim's head, there was a clear hexagonal-shaped wound near her left temple. The police had initially thought this injury was caused by the car accident, but upon closer inspection, it was apparent that the nut protruding from the car door also had a hexagonal shape. It seemed likely that the victim's head had struck the nut with force, creating the wound. The location of the impact clearly could not have been caused by a traffic accident, which meant it could only have been the result of someone forcefully banging her head against it. Suspicion 4. There was an unusually large amount of blood in the back of the car. Normally, when a wounded person is placed in a car wrapped in a blanket, they would not leave so much blood. Moreover, the blood was found not only on the car's floor, but also on the ceiling, sides, and doors. A person who was unconscious after being injured wouldn't be able to leave so much blood on the ceiling unless, after being injured, Yvonne had rolled around in the car, struggling to get away, or even tried to open the car door to escape. This completely contradicted Matheson's statement. Suspicion 5. At the time of the incident, it was raining heavily. Matheson claimed that he had carried his injured wife from the road into the car, so he should have been soaked by the rain. Yet, the bloodstains found on the sun visor and the ceiling of the car showed no signs of being diluted by rainwater. This indicated that the bloodstains had been there before Yvonne was placed in the car. Suspicion 6. Through the use of stringing techniques and a triangular board to analyze the trajectory of the blood splatter, Dr. Lai identified the exact origin of the bloodstains that had not been diluted by rain. The position of the blood spatter pointed to Yvonne's head, showing that she had been struck at least 4 times while sitting on the driver's seat. This indicated that, at the time, Yvonne had been sitting upright in the driver's seat and was struck in the head by someone. Suspicion 7. Using white paper and chemical reagents, Dr. Lai discovered bloodstains on the rear side of the car as well, including a bloody handprint. It seemed that the victim had desperately tried to cling to something. This further confirmed that Yvonne had not been unconscious when she was placed in the car, but that she had been involved in a violent struggle, leaving these marks. Suspicion 8. In the door frame, Dr. Lai found nearly 20 strands of hair. Upon examination, the hair was identified as belonging to Yvonne. The broken ends of the strands indicated that her scalp had been forcefully struck, suggesting that she had been hit with a hard object, such as a baton or a police flashlight. This indirectly supported the presence of blood splatter inside the car, suggesting that she had been beaten severely before being placed inside the vehicle. All of the evidence pointed to the fact that Mrs. Yvonne's death was not just a simple traffic accident, as Mr. Matheson had claimed. Dr. Lai pieced together all the clues and reconstructed the crime scene, gradually revealing the truth about her death. Mrs. Yvonne had initially been sitting calmly in the driver's seat. For some unknown reason, Mr. Matheson suddenly used a hard object to repeatedly strike her in the head. These blows caused blood to splatter onto the dashboard. At that moment, Mrs. Yvonne began to resist, and a violent struggle ensued between the two, resulting in bloodstains on the car's ceiling, likely from her head rubbing against it. Mrs. Yvonne then attempted to flee toward the back of the car, but Mr. Matheson caught her. The struggle continued in the back seat, leaving more blood on the ceiling, walls, and door of the car. Additionally, there was a bloody handprint on the side of the vehicle, indicating that Mrs. Yvonne had desperately tried to cling to something during the struggle. It seemed that Mrs. Yvonne had grown weak, prompting Mr. Matheson to stage a fake traffic accident to cover up his crime. He dragged her out of the car, drove over her body, and then returned her to the car before calling for emergency assistance. This was clearly a premeditated murder, meticulously planned to appear like an accident. Despite the strong circumstantial evidence, one question remained. Why would a police officer like Mr. Matheson kill his wife? Investigators delved deeper into his background. After a thorough investigation, they uncovered a shocking secret. Mr. Matheson, besides being a police officer, was a successful businessman with a fortune of $1.6 million. In the early years of his police career, he worked in the narcotics division and gained a reputation for his involvement in undercover operations. Over time, he built a successful career and amassed wealth. However, he had a significant financial problem. He had partnered with a friend to open a small shopping center, which was drowning in $800,000 of debt. Coincidentally, Mr. Matheson had recently purchased a series of life insurance policies, accident insurance, and mortgage insurance for his wife. According to the policy terms, if Mrs. Yvonne died, Mr. Matheson would receive $400,000. If she died in an accident, he would receive $595,000. And if the cause of death was a car accident, he would receive $675,000. This was the perfect motive for murder. The police also discovered that Mrs. Yvonne had called a crisis center about a week before her death. According to the phone operator, Mrs. Yvonne expressed her fear that her husband was plotting to kill her for the insurance money. When asked if she wanted the police involved, she declined, saying, "Don't. If he knows I called, he will kill me." Combining this information with the large insurance payouts, everything became clear. Mr. Matheson had killed his wife for money. Dr. Lai took all the evidence to his lab, carefully analyzing and cross-checking every detail. After ensuring there were no mistakes, he wrote a comprehensive report and sent it to Prosecutor Spang, who was handling the case. Upon reading Dr. Lai's report, Prosecutor Spang immediately decided to charge Mr. Matheson with murder. On December 5, 1993, Matheson was officially arrested. Just 10 days after his arrest, on December 15, 1993, the police held a pre-trial hearing. Dr. Lai was present at the trial and provided a series of expert opinions. Since the suspect was an experienced police officer with over 20 years of service, the legal process was delayed several times. It wasn't until October 1995 that the long-awaited trial of the Matheson case finally took place. During the trial, Matheson still tried to offer numerous reasons to refute the police's suspicions. However, in the face of irrefutable evidence, his testimony was riddled with contradictions. After less than 3 hours of deliberation, the 12-member jury unanimously concluded that Matheson was guilty of murder and sentenced him to life imprisonment. On November 21, 2013, the sentencing court reduced Matheson's life sentence to 25 years. However, he did not live to see his release. In 2015, he passed away in prison. Thanks to a truck that had not yet been disposed of, Dr. Lai unveiled the truth of a case that seemed like it had been settled. The reason why the renowned Chinese detective became famous worldwide was due to his logical reasoning skills and his meticulous, careful approach to work. No matter where the evidence or clues lead, no matter who is responsible for breaking the law, his sole objective in any investigation is to uncover the truth. In this case, it was the bloodstains that became the silent accusation for the victim. That evidence revealed the truth to the diligent and skilled investigators. Some cases may appear ordinary at first glance, but upon closer inspection, seemingly insignificant details can pack a powerful punch. In fact, when solving a problem, the person who can think outside the box and find a breakthrough solution will ultimately succeed. In this case, not only did Yvonne's good neighbors speak out for the victim, but the support of the public and the pressure of public opinion also played a crucial role. Without this pressure, the truth of the case may have been buried forever. If the truck, the critical piece of evidence, had been destroyed by the perpetrator who paid to have it disposed of, the case would have had no chance of being turned around. In the field of forensic science, Dr. Edmond Locard's principle has helped humanity find justice in hidden cases. Locard's principle is a theory about the transfer of trace evidence between objects. According to this principle, each contact leaves a trace. The essence of his theory suggests that when two objects come into contact, each one leaves something from the other or leaves something on the other. Everything that the perpetrator touches, even unconsciously, leaves evidence like a silent witness. With the advancement of criminal investigation and forensic technology, even criminals who may have escaped punishment in the past will now find it much harder to evade the law. What do you think about this case? Do you believe that if it hadn't been for Dr. Lai, the case would have remained forgotten forever? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe to the channel to support me and not miss out on the next thrilling stories. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.